Last month we were chatting about the Cybermen, so this month it's only fair that we talk about the Daleks. Welcome to
Doctor Who, the Fan Show!
Hello, I'm Christel Dee and welcome to the Fan Show. This month we are talking about the Daleks, and joining me to talk about the Daleks is the fabulous Nick Briggs, who has been doing the voices for the Daleks since 2005, and before that in Big Finish, which you are also the executive producer of.
That's correct, yes. And since I was 5, although I wasn't executive producer of Big Finish when I was 5, although it sort of feels like that sometimes.
Before we get stuck in, Nick, as a Dalek expert,
Yes.
would you mind going through the creation of the Daleks for us?
Well, as Terry Nation, the writer, was asked to write a script for Doctor Who, and he was a writer for a big comedian back in the, or comic actor back in the 60s, Tony Hancock. People may have heard of Hancock's Half Hour. And so, you know, Terry Nation, I think, really felt that he'd arrived as a big, proper writer, and, you know, and to be asked to write for something like a kids' TV show, he was, I think he rejected it out of hand. But then he fell out with Tony Hancock, who's historically known to have been a difficult person to get along with, and they had a big row, and he was sacked. And so he quickly said to his agent, "Is that, you haven't said no to that BBC gig for kids, have you?" And so he worked, I don't know how quickly he worked, but it was something like a script a week or something like that.
And in terms of the fictional world, I mean, there are kind of two origin stories for the Daleks. We've got the first time we see them in 1963, the Daleks, where they speak of a war happening and mutation, but we don't actually see their creator. The concept of a creator isn't introduced until Genesis of the Daleks in 1975.
Yes, I mean,
so
you don't really, no one really knows when that first Dalek story was set. The idea was, I think, that we sort of assume that it's very early on in their development somehow. But that doesn't quite fit with what happened in Genesis of the Daleks. The bald truth is, folks, that it completely contradicted everything that had come before. However, you can sort of, with a bit of, you can kind of make them fit and say, well, they didn't mention Davros because of X, Y, Z. So I don't know. There's a theory that the first Dalek story is actually the last Dalek story. That is the complete destruction of the Daleks.
Yes.
When they somehow have retreated to their city and can't go outside anymore. And that really is the end of the Daleks. That's given me chills, just saying that. But yeah, I've always been crazy about them. And they are, of course, I feel sort of immodest saying this, but it's nothing to do with me, really. The reason that we're still here talking about Doctor Who now, because Doctor Who would not have survived without the Daleks. Also, I'm strangely feeling immodest again, but again, nothing to do with me. I would also say that every other Doctor Who monster is kind of an attempt to be as good as the Daleks, you know, in one way or another. I know more recently we've had, you know, crazier, weirder things which have stepped away from that, but certainly all those classic monsters, you know, all of them wanted to sort of capture that feeling of, you know, implacable evil.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, the creation of the Daleks, I guess, was inspired by, I mean, it's very obviously inspired by the Nazis, which, you know, in 1963, they hadn't been out of rations that long in the war, although it happened, you know, 20 years earlier, they still were feeling the effects of that. And I think to see that reflected on TV was still probably quite a big thing.
Also, there is undeniably just something fascinating and cool about the design.
Yeah.
And also, but on another level, they're very British because they seem to be very sort of Heath Robinson, I think that's the name of the guy, wasn't it? Sort of design, which is bits and pieces put together. They look like household objects and radiators and things, don't they?
Well, I think there's a reason for that because they only had 50 quid to make each Dalek.
Although that was quite a lot of money in those
quite a lot of money
days.
at the time. I think the initial design was a lot more interesting if you look at the initial drawings that they did. But in the end, they didn't have enough money to make these props. So they had to get a sink plunger and stick a sink plunger, a whisk, well, not a whisk, but, you know, looks like a whisk, and sort of just make do, really.
Yeah, necessity being the mother of invention. Quite often the best ideas come up when there are no other options on the table. And, you know, it's the whole thing of sitting down and planning something and rejecting loads of different ideas and trying to make it the best thing. Sometimes that just comes to nothing.
Yeah.
You just need someone to say, oh, let's quickly do that because we've got no time, we've got no money, let's just do it. And the Daleks are, you know, an example of that. The other thing that works for me for the Daleks, the reason I think they're so popular, one of the reasons, is that they are it's like your fridge suddenly shouting at you that it wants to murder you. You know what I mean? Because I think now if we create a villain, we often make them smooth talking and rather corporate, because those are our our paranoia about the whole world being run by unelected corporations, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's our preoccupation. In those days, their preoccupation was goose-stepping soldiers taking over your city. You know?
Well, in contrast to the Cybermen, who, as we spoke about last month, constantly trying to upgrade and improve, the Daleks, in their eyes, are perfect, so why would they change? And I think, as you mentioned earlier, that's one of the keys to their success, really, is that they are so consistent. We know what we're going to get.
I think the changes in the Daleks are always very detectable because they are, well, sort of monotone, just in every way. And so when those bumps occur, when they suddenly become a bit emotional or they're very devious, you notice it more because it was coming from quite a flat level in the first place. I mean, they changed their design from the first story to the second story. They gave them big bumpers and to go, that sounds weird, but it's to go over curbs and things.
Yeah.
And then they put the slats on, didn't they, instead of the sort of loops on the side. So they've evolved the design a little bit, but it's essentially, the essential Dalekness has never gone away, even with the new paradigm Daleks, which I know a lot of people didn't like. They were still, it may not have been quite the same silhouette, but it was still the same thing. You could absolutely tell it was a Dalek.
Yes.
You wouldn't, if you say, what's that? And people will say, well, that's a Dalek, isn't it? Obviously, because it's got the boom and the boom and the boom, that's it, you're done. And the bumps, those are the essential aspects of it.
But all of them, I guess, the key thing with the Daleks is the racial purity thing, which is interesting because when we get to the 80s, we get to Remembrance, where you have the two opposing sides, Dalek civil war almost, and so you start to get these sort of different divisions of Daleks.
And Ben Aronovich, who wrote Remembrance of the Daleks, was very keen on, when he was tackling that, to go back to the origins. He thought, well, come on, they are the Nazis, let's do the racial purity thing. And I think there is also a tendency historically, not to sound too socio-political, for extreme groups to split because they become so dogmatic about what they think. They start to disagree with each other on small points of ideology, and I think that's what the factions of the Daleks are about. From the outside you just think, well, you're all nasty and we're all going to die as a result of your civil war, so what's the difference for us? But for them, the difference is...
They're all fundamentalists, really, aren't they?
One thing is that the Doctor, because he is essentially an optimist, even though he has moments of extreme pessimism, I think he's always, bizarrely, surprised by the Daleks never changing. I think he goes, oh, they're really bad, aren't they? And you feel like the Daleks are going to go, duh, but that's what we love about the Doctor, because he has hope. And there is no hope with a Dalek, but he always entertains. That's certainly something I've explored in some of my Dalek scripts for Big Finish, that the Doctor thinks, I just would hope that you will offer me the opportunity of you changing. Because one of the things we haven't mentioned about the Daleks is they're really clever. They have a fierce intellect. They can solve lots of problems. They've done some really clever stuff. They just use it all for the wrong thing. It's so sad.
Well, interestingly, the invention of the Time War that Russell created in 2005 sort of gave them a whole new lease of life, really. And
the whole business of the Time War is Russell looking at old Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, from the point of view of a very creative writer, reinventing it. Isn't it? Now, what's the evidence here? The Doctor was sent by the Time Lords to stop the Daleks being created, but he failed. The Daleks are never going to let that go. No. Inevitably, there's going to be some huge conflict between them. And also, he'd seen in other Dalek stories the Daleks could time travel. They were cruising for a... Yes, it was bound to happen. It was a really smart thing to do. And I remember when Rob told me, and we think of it as normal now, but it was quite a radical, different idea. I had no... It took me 2 seconds to think it was brilliant. After he told me, I was thinking, that's fantastic.
Well, it's huge. It is huge. And I think, not just the Daleks, but having the Doctor as the last of his kind, particularly in that story as well, you have the last well, supposedly the last Dalek,
Yeah.
the last Time Lord, and you have both of them in the room together. And I think what's really highlighted is their similarities.
Yes.
And how similar they are, which the Doctor hates,
Yeah.
you know, and because the Dalek says we are the same, and the Doctor will not have that.
And the Daleks, you look at the classic series, you know, they were clearly the most popular, important Doctor Who monster. You know, some people, they're not quite to their taste, say, but you know, you can't, even those who maybe don't like the Daleks, Doctor Who fans who don't like the Daleks, I'm sure there aren't many of them, they can't they can't deny that they are big and they are successful. And you know, Russell was just sort of saying, well, let's say that then, let's say they are the biggest enemy of the Doctor. That had never actually been said before, but you know, he hung a lantern on it.
Yeah. So, Nick, you know what I'm going to ask you.
What are you going to ask me?
Can you teach us how to do a Dalek voice?
Well, in order to do that, look what's down here. It's a ring modulator. Yes, you may have heard of one. It's, right, and here is the microphone.
Ooh.
Yes, as you'll be able to hear, that's more or less, that's just my voice coming through now, and then you can just start to add a bit of modulation, and you'll hear it sort of fluttering.
And now there is, yeah. And so if you want to say you will be exterminated, especially in that sort of rising manic way, it's sort of, you will be exterminated! Yeah.
So do you want to go?
Okay, yeah, let's do it. Right, angry Dalek, yeah?
Angry Dalek, yeah.
You will be exterminated!
Pretty good, pretty good.
You have to find your voice with this, I think.
You do? Yeah. It would help if you were connected to headphones and things, then you could hear it very intimately, but you know.
My name is Christel Dee. Exterminate!
What's that?
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us to talk about the Daleks. And if you'd like to hear an extended version of this discussion, you can do so as a podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud, links below. To subscribe, click here. And for a virtual tour of the set of Power of the Daleks, you can click here. Bye!